Let me give you the evolution of objection-free selling. First, how many of you in this room as salespeople absolutely hate trying to overcome objections? One hand. Everybody else loves overcoming objections? How many of you don't even try to really overcome objections because you just don't feel comfortable doing it? Right. If you've gone through sales training programs, they all talk about it. Everywhere I go, when people ask me to do sales training, I'll say, what's one of the things you'd like me to cover? And inevitably, it's overcome objections. And what I'm going to tell you is you should never try to overcome an objection. Now, I didn't always believe that way. When I got my start in sales, I was in hardcore in-home sales. I was selling home improvement, in-ground pools and spas. My first job was the spa store in San Diego, California. My boss, Steve Wren, who was the owner, first day on the job, he said, "Mel, here's what I want you to understand. There is a quarterback, a running back, and a halfback. There is no such animal as a B-back. You either close the sale when you're in the home or you will never get it." Well, I feel bad in retrospect for some of my prospects. Because I would get in the home at 6:30 at night for what I promised would be a 1-hour appointment. At midnight, I'd still be there. They were either going to sign a contract or call the police. I don't sell that way today. In any event, shortly after I started working, I was doing pretty good. I became sales manager, and I hired a friend of mine, Kevin Ritka. He and I had worked together in a hospital. We were both house orderlies. Kevin wanted to make more money, and I was doing much better as a salesperson. I said, "Come to work for me." Every morning, I'd say to Kevin, "So how'd it go last night?" And Kevin would say, "Oh, it went great. I just have to call them next week, but I'm sure they're going to go with us." And after about 10 days of this, I'm going to my wife and I'm going, "Man, I'm never hiring a friend again. I'm going to have to fire Kevin." Turned out that Kevin became the king of the B-back. He was selling as many spas as I was. Now, admittedly, I made a lot more money because of the way you get paid in home improvement sales. But Kevin was actually doing pretty well. That was my first epiphany, that maybe this idea of overcoming objections doesn't work so well. My second epiphany came in 1986. I was an enroller for a third-party administrator in Fayetteville, North Carolina for Section 125 plans. Now, was anybody involved in Section 125 cafeteria plans with spending accounts in 85, 86? Okay, so you may remember that in those days, they didn't have to file claims to get back the medical reimbursement. The money would come out of their paycheck. If somebody said $1,200 a year, $100 would come out every month before taxes. Then it would come back in after taxes were calculated. They had an increase in take-home pay of $25, of which we took part of that and put it into universal life. Well, as we got to the end of '86, the IRS had released their first preliminary regulations about this and said, hey, there has to be a risk of forfeiture. If there's no risk of forfeiture, it doesn't work. So the TPA I worked for decided to be ahead of the curve and started to make people actually have to file for claims. So now we're going into Cumberland County schools, 5,500 employees. We have a bunch of enrollers. We were getting paid $150 a day or 10% of whatever we wrote. The TPA borrowed over $1 million to fund this deal, thinking that we would all write, $1,500, $2,000 a day universal life. Unfortunately, when you tell somebody that $100 is coming out, but they're not getting it right back, they tend to be a little reluctant to spend any more money. So most of us were writing, $600, $700, $800 a day. Marshall, the owner, came up with this idea at the beginning of November that anybody who would write at least $1,200 a day in premium for the week would get a $200 cash bonus at the end of the week in addition to their per diem. He also talked a lot about overcoming objections. By about the end of November, I was feeling pretty bad because I was at the bottom of the heap. I had not qualified for not one bonus. I was still writing $600, $700 a day. I was really feeling bad because Marshall had previously talked to me about becoming a staff member and running the enrollments. I'm going home and I'm going to my wife, oh God, he's never going to hire me. My first shot at a real job, he's never going to hire me. Luckily he did. But through the whole enrollment, I never qualified for bonus. Fast forward, I'm on the staff. It's January 15th, first paycheck for the teachers. Our phone began ringing at 8 o'clock that morning and rang for 3 days. By the time all of the fall-off was done, I was the top producer because I never tried to overcome objections.